Hello, students. I want to talk about one of the problems of this week that is challenging. I'm going to give credit to all students who attempted to answer this question, which is a very lengthy one and is a very challenging problem. If you try to solve it, and if you even got a wrong number, you still get credit because this is not an easy problem. This is problem 21, dash oh 06. And first, we want to see what the problem is, and we want to look at the answer and go through the answer and see what it means. First of all, it says that it is a firm. In this firm, when it says conservative, means that this firm is careful, is not trying to, borrow a lot. The board of governors of this firm says that suppose you cannot get more than, 40% the 40% of capital structure of the company cannot be in loans, which means if they want to borrow money, if they need $1 million, let's say $100,000, $40,000 of it can come from the bank, $60,000 of it can come from other financing. What are the other financing? Is that the company should use the profits it makes, that we call it retained earning, and or it can go and create, issue new shares to raise the rest of the money that it needs. Let's say if they need $100,000, for example. The company, imagine, that has made $12 million, and out of $12 million, they say that the board says that let's go ahead and give 40% of this $12 million as dividends. Dividends are like interest, give to the shareholders. Therefore, after they give that interest to, which is $4,800,000 to the shareholders, $7,200,000 remains in the company. And that's called retained earnings. And they keep this money for some reason. Maybe they need to buy something, and think about that, as something that they keep for different reasons for investment. And the stocks of the company currently is $40, and they pay $4 per share as dividends. One way I just guess that to calculate to see how many shares the company have is that, do you remember we said they gave $4.8 million, as for dividends. And if each share gets this much, we can even calculate by dividing the numbers to see how many shares this company has. And this company has a growth rate of 8%. Think about 8% is that, think about it, that if its profits every year goes up by 8%, if this year they made $12 million, maybe next year they make 8% more. And if the company can raise capital, they can borrow money from the bank, or if they need, extra money to invest, imagine they want to buy something. Therefore, when they want to buy something expensive, they can use this money, retained earning, or they can go to bank, but they have limitations because their board is saying that they cannot have more than 40% of their money from the borrowed money from the bank. And therefore, they have to go, if they need a lot of money, they can not only use this money, they can use, as long as they don't go over 40%, they can go and borrow from the bank. And also, they can issue new shares, but new shares will be sold at $36. Now, we want to know what is the cost of retained earnings. This is the retained earnings. What is the cost of it? Cost, as you all know, we discussed that cost of capital. The meaning of cost of capital is when you borrow money that's 6% from the bank, the cost to you is 6%. That is the rate, the interest rate that you are giving. That's the cost to you. Interest is always considered as, cost of capital. Therefore, when you have a retained earning here, that is a cost. Although you are not borrowing, but you are tying the capital to your own company. Why should you do that? It's going to cost you when you do that because you are not putting this money into a good work. When you don't put it into a good work, that is a cost to you. Therefore, we want to know what is the cost of this retained earning. Of course, you are not borrowing for, if you were borrowing from the bank, you could easily say 5%, that's what the bank is charging. Therefore, how do we calculate the cost of, retained earning? We have a formula for that. And now that you understood the concept of this problem, we come here and I came here and asked, here it is. It says that the cost, R means, think about as a rate, as I said, interest rate. But here, of course, it is not interest rate. Cost of capital for retained earning has a formula. The formula for retained earning, the cost when you keep the money in the company and you don't do anything with it, just you let it sit there, there is a cost to you. What is the cost? The growth rate, which is 8%. Didn't I tell you the company has a growth rate of 8%? Not only you are gonna, when you let the money sits there, not only you are gonna to miss that growth rate, also you are going to have an additional miss, which is D1 divided by P0. What is the D1? The dividends of next year divided by the price of the company at this year. We know that the price of the company this year is $40. P0, do you see this P0 is 40? The dividend of next year is $4.32. Why did I tell you? Where did we come this? Do you remember we said that $4 per share? They gave a dividend. Next year, we said the company is growing at 8%, therefore 1.08. That is we are multiplying. That is the dividend of next year. Therefore, we take that one, which is 4.32. We divide it by the price of the stocks in today's date, which is $40. Here, this is the formula. And we add it to the growth rate that we have. And then we get what percentage? 18.8% when we keep the retained earning in our company. When we want to deploy it for some purposes, that is the cost to us as owners of the company, 18.8%. And guess what? The banks charge very little, maybe 4%, maybe 5%. You might say that, oh, are we crazy to use this one that is costing us so much and use this one? Imagine that for this company, we want to buy a big corporate jet for the president of the company. He is a big shot, Elon Musk, and he needs a corporate jet, and we have to buy a jet for him, an aeroplane for him. Therefore, we have to come up with money. We have to come up with $20 million. How much those $20 million, where should we keep we get the money? Didn't we say that we have some retained earnings? We can use that. But that retained earnings, if you remember, it was $7.2 million. It was not 20 million. We needed $20 million. Therefore, we say, okay, let's take that $7.2 million, although it is costing us for 18.8%, and let's go to bank also, get some money from bank. But we are not free to go and whatever we want to get from the bank, because the board of governors has told us, hey, we do not allow you to go out there and borrow like a maniac. We let you borrow, but your borrowing should be based on 40% of the total money of the aeroplane. Therefore, you have to come up with, financing, capital, financing that you can buy a corporate jet for $20 million using your retained earning, which is going to cost you 18.8%, and some borrowing money from the bank, which is going to be 5%. Let's say the bank says, if, as long as you want $2 million, we give you 5%. But if you want more than 2 million, we give you 6%. The bank also is smart. It raises the interest. Therefore, you have three ways of raising that $20 million to buy that aeroplane. One is through the retained earning, which is right here. Now we go and let's see how much it costs if we issue new shares. That is also going to cost us, just as a rate associated with it. To calculate that, we have to do the same thing. Find the dividend of next year. We found out that the dividend of next year would be $4.32. $4 was the dividend of this year. 32 cents is the 8 times 4 is 32. 8% was the growth rate. Therefore, the dividends of next year would be 432, which is here, divided by price that the new shares that we are going to cost, that was 36. Therefore, when we issue new stocks, that the cost of capital to us is 20%. So far, we have two numbers: the cost for the retained earning and the cost for the when we issue new shares. But we need $20 million. And let's say the board is going to tell you, the board of governors, we won't allow you to go out there like a maniac and issue new shares. They are costing us 20%. We are not going to do that. We have to use some mix and some restrictions they have put on us that we have to follow to make sure we can choose the least expensive way by combining some retained earnings, which is going to cost us 18.8%, and issuing new bonds, issuing new stocks, and also borrowing. Let's see, cost of borrowing is that if the bank is telling us that up to $26 million, $2.6 million they give us, and they are going to charge us, and that would the cost to us would be the 8%, that they however, when we are going to pay 8%, we have some kind of tax advantage. That means that 1 minus our tax rate, which is 32.32%, that will reduce this 8% to 5.4%. That is a kind of effective way for us, the cost of the loan that we get up to $22.6 million. However, we can borrow more than $2.6 million. In that case, the bank is going to tell us they will charge us 9% interest. This is 0.09 is coming from. However, when we pay, we pay interest to the banks, somehow it will help us in some ways, reduces, it has some savings for us. Therefore, the effective rate to us, the cost, it becomes 6.1%. If you look at here, we have four types of cost. One is the cost of retained earning, 18.8%. Cost of the issuing new shares, which is 20%. Cost of borrowing up to 2.6 million, which is 5.4%, and the cost of borrowing more than $2.6 million, which is 6.1%. We have to use a good combination of it in such a way that we don't make our board of governors mad, because they don't want us to go there and borrow more than 40%. Therefore, and we need $20 million to buy an aeroplane for Elon Musk. Therefore, what can we do? We come here and we look at here. One thing we need is marginal cost of capital. Marginal cost of capital means when we go 1% up or down. When we go 1% up, how would that affect us? Imagine that first we have to find our break even based on capital structure. Capital structure is based on 30%, and 70%. Of course, when we look at it, it was based on 40% and 60%. Do you remember? Here is just, an example I am saying. Therefore, the actual number here is rather than dividing by, a break even for this retained earning, 7.2 had to be divided by 0.6 because if the board of governors said, if the board said 30 to 70%, of course, this could be the right number. 7.2 divided by 0.7, that is the cost, percentage of equity, and that is break-even point for retained earning would be $8.6 million. We can, if we go above this one, we have somehow broken the rule that the board has told us 30% and 70%. Regarding the loan, in terms of, a low-cost loan, it is 22.6 divided by 0.3, and that is $10.285 million. Therefore, we come and put our, schedule for weighted average cost of capital. Weighted average cost of capital between 0 to $8.6 million. The cost of debt is 0.54, and then the cost of equity is 18.8. Where does these numbers come from? These numbers come from here. Do you see it is 5.4 and 18.8. We go after the lowest way of cost. We don't go to issue new shares here because the new shares is going to cost us 20%, while borrowing and combination of borrowing or 30% borrowing, 70%, retained earning, would give us, weighted average cost of capital. We say that weighted of the first one, 0.3 times the cost of equity in percentage, which we calculated in here, times here it is, times the weighted cost of equity, we said it is 70%, and the cost with that, when we do that weighted average cost of capital, we get 14.8%, as long as that jet that we want to buy for Elon Musk is $8 million. Therefore, the first financing comes with this capital. That means out of $20 million that we need, fortunately, up to $8.66 million of it, the cost to us is 14.8%. Then we need, of course, because the jet is $20 million, we need extra money. Between 8.6 to 10.28, do you remember the bank had told us that if you borrow more than 2.6, do you remember? Up to 10.285, which is in here, the bank told us that the rate is not going to be 5.4. The bank said that the rate is going to be 6.1. That's where it comes in here. We calculate weighted average cost of capital, that, and then anything above this 10.5, we have no other choice except going to that expensive financing, because we used up all the retained earnings that we already had. We don't have any more retained earning. We cannot go and borrow more money from the bank. The bank might give us more money, but the board has told us, no, you cannot go over 30% or 40% of borrowing. Because of that reason, we have gone to the most expensive way of financing, which is going to be issuing new stocks, which in that case, the cost of capital, anything above $10 million is going to cost us 15.8%. Therefore, when we need to buy an airplane for Elon Musk, for the head of the corporation, we can go and come up with $20 million. But the good thing is that between up to $8 million of it it will cost us 14.8%. And then from 8.6 to 10.2 million, that cost is $15, 15%. However, when we go above this $10 million, we are, the aeroplane is 20 million, the cost is 15 million. The cost is 15.8. Maybe we can go back to the corporate, to the chair of the board, and say that, hey, it is not in the best interest of the corporation. We buy an aeroplane for Elon Musk that is $20 million. Let's go and buy an aeroplane for him, which is maximum $10 million. Because if we do that, up to 8 million of it, just we pay 4%, 14%, and then for the rest of 1 million, we pay 15%. And therefore, that way, we are not going to go after a high cost of capital. But if it is something that we have to show it's an important person, you have to buy that corporate jet for him. In that case, we go with the entire scenario in here, and we raise $20 million. And by understanding that everything beyond 10.2 million, is going to cost us 18. We take advantage of this one first. That means we exhaust this one. Then we go and exhaust this one. And up to this point, $10 million of it has been raised. And for the rest of 10 million, we have to pay 18 point, let me, 1 second, put the battery to my computer. 1 second. Okay, sorry. And therefore, I just wanted you to see the concept where these numbers, this is not an easy problem. Very difficult, very time consuming. If you didn't get, as I said, if you didn't get the answer, I want you to know. Then, effective increased income tax rate. When the tax rate goes up, the cost of capital to you decreases. Why? In terms of, because it comes from this formula. Do you see this formula that says, where is that formula? That here it is, tax rate. Your tax rate here is 0.32. And then when this number increases, this number, imagine this becomes, instead of 0.32, becomes 0.5. When it becomes 0.5, 1 minus 0.5 is 0.5, Therefore, the higher this number goes, the 1 minus a higher number is a smaller number. When it is a smaller number, that smaller number is being multiplied by this 8. Here, we know that, here is when you subtract 0.32 from 1, you get 0.68. If your tax rate goes up, that 0.68 becomes, for example, 0.58. When you multiply 0.58 by this 8, you end up getting a lower number. That is, the cost of debt to you will become lower. The interest that the bank is charging you is still 8%. That doesn't change. The bank doesn't change. But at the same time, because of tax reasons, the cost of capital for debt, is reduced. That's what it is trying to tell you in here. If firm retains earnings, all earnings and price is unaffected. Do you remember we said that this company earned $12 million? Now the question would be, do you remember we said that the company is gonna to give 40% of this earnings for dividends? Sometimes, the board of governors might come and say, hey, we have to buy a corporate jet. We cannot go and, pay high cost weighted average cost of capital. We know that the retained earning, the cost of capital, we already figured out that the cost of capital for retained earning is 18%. But how much money did we retain in the company? We made $12 million, but we gave $4.8 million, the 40% of that as dividend to shareholders. The board comes and says, hey, let's not give money to the shareholders, because shareholders, are like board members. Board members are most likely big time shareholders. They say, let's not distribute money between the shareholders. Instead of that, let's keep the whole $12 million, because if we don't keep the $12 million, we have to go into higher cost of capital, which is 20% to issuing new share. Therefore, the board comes and says, let's keep all the $12 million, which is right in here. Do you see that? $12 million. In that term, we divide it, because the board has said that keep the retained earning and equity financing at 0.7. We divide it. Now we can come up with up to $17 million. Do you remember in the first scenario, we came and had the maximum we could come up before going to 20%? It was 10.28. Now we are in a better shape, because instead of giving that retained earning to the shareholders, we kept it inside the company. That way we can buy the corporate jet for Elon Musk. And for now, do you see, up to 17 million we have. But above the 17 million, we have no other choice. We have to go to the level up. In this case, we are short by 3 million here. That 3 million, it's okay to go and pay 20%, issue new shares. That would cost us, cost of capital is 20%. Therefore, the board is making a right decision maybe by saying that let's not distribute the because we are not distributing. Now we can go all the way to $17 million. In the first case in here, do you see, we could go up to 10 million to keep the rate at 15%. But here we can go all the way to 17 million and keep the rate still at 15%. Do you see that? For only 3 million short that we are here, we go. And therefore, these are something that the Board of Governors have to decide. And Chief Financial Officer, you have to decide how you want to come with the $20 million. It would be crazy if you go there and say, let's go ahead and issue shares and get to, if you do that, it is $20 million. You are going to pay 20%, penalty. It's not penalty. It's going to cost, Therefore, it's not a smart way, just like go out like a maniac and, issue new shares. It is a very smart way to strategize and use the money of the bank, combine it in such a way not to make sure you also listen. You have to follow what the board said in terms of capital structure. When we say capital structure, is that what part of your financing is coming from the loan, from the bank, from the bonds that you have sold. What kind of financing is coming from your retained earnings, or by not giving any dividends and keeping more retained earnings, or by issuing new shares. Sometimes issuing new shares might be in your best advantage, but in this case, for this particular company, issuing new share, we have no other choice. We have to issue at some point if we go with this scenario, but this scenario might be the best case scenario, because the amount of borrowing at the $3 million that we are borrowing, we pay 15.8%. But if we went with this scenario, we had to borrow $10 million at 15.8%. Do you see that? Therefore, as a chief financial officer, you would say, let's stop paying dividends, keep that, and let's go with this scenario, and we can go ahead and we have our $20 million and we can buy that corporate share. I hope I explained it well, but as I said, this was an unusually difficult problem, but at least I hope you understand the concept that what we are trying to explain as students, we want you to understand why this weighted average cost of capital is so important for corporations because these decisions have to be made on daily basis. It's not just like aeroplane. You have to go and buy equipment. You have to go and buy another company. Or, imagine companies constantly buy another company. Imagine Amazon buys this company. They have to raise money. How do they raise it? They raise it through this concept. They raise it by raising capital in terms of borrowing, issuing shares, bonds is more a form of borrowing. Going to investment bank, going to bank and borrow from the bank, that's a borrowing. Then they have another way of financing that is through equity. How is through equity? Retained earnings, not by using dividends, stop paying dividends, and also issuing new shares. Therefore, we want you, this was a more comprehensive problem, and I hope you paid attention, and if you have any questions, let us know.